All right, everyone. So if you're just beginning this journey of learning R, I would start either here or the intro to R. This one specifically is R Markdown introduction. So R Markdown is a format in R that you can use to basically write reports or to keep your code separate from any text you have, and it's different than an R script. I like to use them for everything because it helps me with my ADHD to like keep everything separate. And because I tend to write a lot of like annotations and a lot of interpretation of my code within the document itself. So this helps my brain a lot. A lot of people also use it to make websites, GitHub docs, slides, Word documents, PDFs, etc. So I think it's a really handy format because you type everything as you would normally in R, except that it's text, and then you have separate code chunks, uh, which I don't have a lot of code in here, but these are the code chunks where you all the code goes in those instead, so it keeps that separate. And then you can do what is called knitting. It's this little knit button here to make this document into whatever you are creating. For this one, I have an HTML document type that I would be knitting this into, and it produces something like this, where you are coding the formatting as you code in an R Markdown document. So now when we knit it, we have headers, we have regular text, we have different sizes of headers. You can do bold, italic, strike through, code, which is gray background, superscripts, M dashes. Like you can do anything you could do in a word processor, but you can do it in R Markdown. And you can also embed images, tables, everything like that, page breaks. And then the code is in the separate code chunk. So if you ever see something like this online, they probably made it through R Markdown. And it's relatively straightforward once you get the handle of it. So we're going to go through learning R Markdown because these tutorials might make a lot more sense as to why there are certain formatting things, or if you look at the knitted document, why it looks the way it does. So I want to reiterate that an R Markdown document is different than an R script file. To write code, you have to create those code chunks and then run those code chunks. And it'll only run what's in that code chunk. And if you set the working directory or set a specific specification for that code chunk, it'll only work for that code chunk alone until you make it a global parameter. But I really like R Markdown documents that make a lot more sense to my brain than an R script file. So some people write entire manuscripts and reports in here. I've never done that, but you can if you want to go down that path. That is an option. So R Markdown versus R scripts. Let's just make sure, belabor that point that it is understood. R Markdown documents are used for producing HTML, PDF, document files that can be shared like a report with your colleagues. They also might be, again, helpful for separating code chunks from text and comments, depending on your learning and organization style. So when you run the code is output in the console per usual. So down here's the console. It'll show the code. It won't necessarily show all of the products of the code, and it'll spit out your products at the end of your code chunk. Any graphics you have don't show up in the viewer window that would normally be over here. They won't show up here in this plot viewer window. They show up below your code chunk. So that is a difference there. Our scripts are probably the most widely used form of documentation of code, and you use comments with the pound sign to describe the code through annotations. So all code is written in sequence, and you have to comment out any text that you are interpreting, that you are annotating, etc. When you run the code is output in the console, and the graphics are shown in the plot viewer over here. rather than at the end of code chunks because there's no code chunks in an R script file. So choose whichever you feel most comfortable with. You can try out R Markdown if you want. You can use your R scripts. You can use something else, whatever you want. Just choose what's right for you and your learning style. However, all of these tutorials will be in R Markdown because that is how I learn and teach most effectively. So again, this is an intro to R Markdown specifically, so you can skip this if you're not interested. But if you want to learn how to make these different documents to share with anyone or to use for yourself, we're going to get into that. So the basic text formatting, some information about that. This is R Markdown specific basic text formatting. So you can only see these results in the output file, which is that HTML for this. So here we're at basic text formatting, going down into the headings and bold and italics. To code different headings, you use multiple pound signs in front of a word, and there has to be a space in between the pound signs and your word. The smaller headings will have more pound signs, so these should decrease in size going down here. So we have the largest heading, heading 1, medium size, heading 2, smallest, heading 3. Heading 1 only has 1 pound sign, 2 has 2, 3 has 3. So as you increase the number of pound signs, you're going to get smaller text for those headings. Bold text, make text bold, you can use double asterisk or double underscores around your words. Either one will make your text bold. For italics, it's single asterisk or single underscores. For strike through, you do double tildes, and that tilde is above the tab key on PCs at least. So do double tildes around both of those words. To make your text look like code, and it changes the color so you know it looks a bit different. You do single accent marks around words. That's the same keystroke as the tilde, but the tilde is shift in that button, and the keystroke is just hitting that button. To make superscripts and subscripts, make a superscript by the little caret symbols, which are shift 6 on a PC. So single carets around words are going to give you superscripts. Make a subscript by using single tildes. And all of these are very small nuances. Like no one's going to expect anyone to remember these. But if you are getting into R Markdown, these will become much more natural as you progress in typing up documents and whatnot. But there's always reference materials out there like this document, many R Markdown cheat sheets that you can refer to be like, oh yeah, how do I do this strike through again? Or something like that. N dash, M dash, and ellipsis. N dash is a double hyphen. M dash is a triple hyphen. Ellipsis is just triple period. So that's what they look like in coding. And if we look, it looks like an ellipsis, an M dash, and an N dash when we do the actual text here. And we have the strike throughs, we've got italics, we've got bolding, we've got superscripts and subscripts here. Those superscripts and subscripts, the reason why this one didn't work is because you have to have those tildes around each individual word. You can't have it around like a phrase here. So that's the nuance for those. If you want to do an inline equation, so R has lots of different ways to make equations and different words that you can use to make symbols for equations. To put an inline equation, surround the text with single dollar signs. And this doesn't have to be, for some reason, this one doesn't have to be every single word. I don't know, R is picky about some stuff, how people originally coded it. But this, just single dollar signs around whatever phrase you're doing. For example, the area of a circle is area equals pi r squared. And this looks like gobbledygook. If you hover over it, it actually does tell you what it's going to look like in that R Markdown document. These are the symbols or phrases for your equations. This forwards or backslash pi, pi, is the pi symbol times r caret bracket 2 is going to give you that r squared value. So this is what it looks like in coding, which I literally just copied and pasted this from online. When you put it in the inline equation, it does show that a equals pi times r squared, exactly what that equation would be. So to make bullet points, you can use hyphens or asterisks and then a hard return between points. So 2 returns there. And there must be a space between the hyphen and text for it to become a bullet point or an asterisk. There has to be that space there. To make us a sub point, you have like a double tab before the asterisk or hyphen, and then that single space there. So what that looks like is, all right, now we have our bullets instead of the hyphens or asterisks, and we have our subpoints as open circles instead of the filled in black ones that had that double tab in there. To make a numbered list, you always put 1 and then a space at the beginning of your text. 1 period space. 1 period space, and you have to have a hard return between these numbers, so always make sure that there's a return there. Notice still how the second and third points here are still 1. And it's at the beginning of the line. R automatically changes these numbers in the output. So we have 1 here, and we have 1, 2, 3 here. So this is a way, like you could put 1, 2, 3 here, and it'll do the same thing. But if you're adding points and whatnot, and you don't want to constantly be changing them as you edit your document, the 1, 1, 1 works really well. And then R automatically knows it's a numbered list. You can embed internet links directly into an R Markdown document. So for example, download the latest version of RStudio at posit.co.downloads or /downloads. And it is the brackets or the, I guess, greater than less than signs around the words or HTML link. So it's simple, less than, greater than signs around the text to create the HTML links. So we'll see that this one looks like a hyperlink, and we can take it and go to download RStudio there. If you don't want to include the actual website address, use brackets and parentheses instead. So for example, download the latest version of bracket RStudio bracket, and then the HTML link or hyperlink in parentheses following that text with no space in between. It'll create a hyperlink through the words RStudio. It won't show this HTML path, but it'll create a hyperlink. So here we just have the RStudio highlighted. We click on it, it takes us to the same exact location because we made them the same hyperlink. So same as that versus that. For images, you can embed image links from your computer into an R Markdown file. So this is very similar to the second method of embedding the internet link, where we had the brackets and parentheses here, but you use a exclamation point in front of the brackets. So Use text within the brackets to make some sort of caption for the image or whatever you want to do. And then the image location must be within your subfolder or whatever, wherever you want it to be as the R Markdown document. Here, our image is located within the figures folder inside of the larger folder of R basics for today's course. So for example, we have the exclamation point, and then it's the brackets around our figure caption. And then it's the parentheses and the file path. If you wanted to learn more about file path and didn't do the intro to R yet, I would talk about or go to the intro to R to look at file path specifically. So we've got our caption and we've got our file path, and it'll embed this image. So what it looks like here is it gives you that figure caption below the image and puts the image in here. This isn't a great resolution image, but it gets the point across. To add a block quote, you use a greater than sign at the beginning of the text. So here, literally just a greater than sign and whatever quote you want to do. I like Yoda, so I put Yoda in here, and that greater than sign turns into this weird block at the side, and then do or do not, there is no try. So just create some block quote there. I'm not too sure why you'd want to so much embed hand code tables specifically into here. But you can if you want to. The hand coding tables is much, in my opinion, is much more effort than it's worth, because you could embed an image of a table or something like that, or have like a code output of a table instead. But to do it, you can have a bunch of lines or a bunch of dashes here. We're gonna have two columns of sex and age. We've got the vertical dash in the middle of those two columns, horizontal dashes here, and we have our text in different rows. So what that looks like then as an end product is it's going to take up the whole width of your HTML file. So we have sex, age, and we have two different rows for that. So it doesn't look great. You can do it by hand, but I really wouldn't recommend it. To make a page break, put 3 hyphens in a row and then a hard return. So just 3 hyphens, return. You get this. It's really hard to see on here, but it's a page break. I will say there's a lot of cool stuff you can add with R Markdown. And if you're interested in learning about the other stuff, look at this R Markdown cheat sheet and some other cheat sheets for R if you're interested. And again, within the R Markdown document itself, we embedded those as code links. So the brackets with the file or the website path hyperlink in parentheses around both of them. Okay, so for coding and knitting, so everything you do in R or RStudio can be done in R Markdown, not just in R script. Which makes R Markdown a very powerful tool for creating any document for your information needs, websites, PDF, etc. I think it's very convenient to make the document R Markdown that contains the background or rationale while you're doing the code, your data interpretations, like everything all in one place that you can share with your advisor, you can share with colleagues, agency personnel, etc. So to embed code chunks, and talking about code chunks specifically, you can enter your R script directly into the document through these code chunks. For PCs, it's Control-Alt-I. And if you hit those together, it'll insert a code chunk. You can also come up to here and do this little +C in this window, and you can insert R code chunk. You can insert Python, you can insert SQL, Stan, other types of code chunks as well, which is pretty cool. Tells us this is an R code chunk right there. You could also name your code chunk, which is what I've done there. And that can help keep things organized as well if you need them. This always has to have the R, or if you insert Python or something, it'll say Python instead of R, just so R knows what kind of code it is. But then you can name it, which is helpful for keeping things together. Your code goes here. This is annotated because it is a code chunk. It's basically an R script within this chunk. So any code that's in here will run unless it's annotated just like an R script. This will run and it'll give us an error because it's not real code. While this is annotated and is commented out, so it is not code. You can do a lot of things with the R scripts in your output, or the code chunk, sorry, in your output. You might want to hide them. You might not want to run some of them because they might take a really long time or they give you errors. Because some knit and R Markdown document, you can't have any errors in it. And if you do, it'll tell you there's an error in this line and you have to go figure it out. And that can be really tedious. But when you're producing something, you don't want any errors in it, so make it nice and clean. If you're doing some junk coding like this is running or whatever you want to put there, you can put something to say, don't run this code chunk. So you can also hide the R script. You can run part of it. You can hide the output, whatever you want to do. So if you want to hide the R script in your code chunk, but you're trying to show the products of it, there's a lot of different functions you can do. So the cheat sheet will help with a full list of these arguments, which are over 60 of them, to tell you what you can do with your code chunks. Say we're going to hide this code chunk. That's why we named it hide. It's comma for these arguments, always after the name. Echo equals false. This will produce a hidden R script using the echo function. It will still show results from the code. So this is helpful when the code is unnecessary or very messy to show. So it's going to hide your code, but it'll still produce the figure or table or whatever you're producing in your document. So echo equals false. For example, maybe we don't want code to run because we were just using it as an example, or we just want to show the code as an example. So this is a do not run name. It's eval equals false. Do not evaluate this code. Do not run it. It prevents the code from running when knitted. This is good for example code when you don't want to produce anything from it. You can run code, but don't include in your final product, and that's include equals false. The output and the code won't be in the knitted document. So this is good for things like setup, like installing or loading packages or setting global parameters, things that are just like housekeeping things for your R document. Maybe you don't want to include them in your final output. A lot of times you'll get warnings from your code. It'll just be like, these X31 observations were removed from this ggplot, for example. Which, yes, when we have NAs, it's going to remove data, something like that. So if you want to hide those messages or warnings, it's message equals false, warning equals false. So if any of the warnings appear otherwise than this, the document will not be knitted. So this is just pretty much preventing messages and warnings from stopping the running of the code and from being shown in the output. If you want to hide output, it's result equals hide, or figure.show equals hide. It hides the output of your results. Like if you did an ANOVA and you don't want those results showing, or model selection or something, or plots, figures, whatever you want, it's going to hide that output, but it could still show the code. If you want to ignore error, error equals true. So we'll run the code even if there is normally an error, but that prevents the code from running, which would normally stop knitting the document. No output would be produced because the code doesn't work, because there is an error there, but it won't stop the production of the R Markdown document during knitting, at least. Sometimes it's really helpful to cache items. So this is cached equals true. And you can have dependencies in here, like depends on whatever code chunk name you had. We could do like ignore error, whatever eval equals false. So just so it wouldn't run here, for example. But caching, so if you have a code chunk that takes a really long time to run, so if you end up looking at like the geospatial analysis, map making stuff, and looking at rasters, they take forever to run in R. And the bigger the raster, the longer it takes. So if you cache it, R creates this like pseudo file or a stored file where it can then call on that file to then produce the knitted document and products rather than creating a new one each time. So it's storing it for later and it'll help R run faster. So R will only run this chunk again and not use that stored file if the code has changed, but not if the data itself has changed. So if this chunk depends on data from another chunk before running, use this depends on with that. So when you add in R code using these code chunks, unless you write the commands of like eval equals false, message equals false, or whatever you want to do, all of your output and code from your code will be printed once the document is knitted. So that means all your graphs, all your data you're showing, all of your code will be directly embedded in the document. But again, use some of these arguments plus the 60 plus in the link that I have in here to really look to see what you need to show, what you can hide, and what would be the best result in your knitted document. And finally, these are specific arguments for each code chunk. And you're probably going to have a lot of code chunks in here because a lot of times we do like one thing, like produce one figure in a code chunk or something like that. So sometimes you want your global parameters, like for the whole document, to be a certain way rather than just each code chunk writing the same thing. So if you want any of these arguments like cache equals true or whatever for the entire R Markdown document, it would be better to change the global parameters. So for example, we say knitter, this is the package, knitter, colon, to say go into knitter and use this function, ops chunk, $set. The same echo equals false. So we don't want the code at all to show throughout the whole document. And we can set it globally that way. We could set like warnings equals hide globally as well. So there's a lot of different things you could add in here to make it for the whole document, not just one document. So a couple other things here for inline code. This is kind of helpful if you were actually writing like a document or report or manuscript. So you can put parts of your code in sentences if you are looking at writing a more report style document. So for example, our data contains R and row trees. You have to have the R there or Python or whatever code you're using. We're using R. We're using the trees data set, for example, which is just like a data set inherent in R. Oops. So if we look at this trees data set, it's the girth, height, and volume of, I think, black cherry trees. So we can look at like using the code to look at our data contains blank trees with an average height of blank. Below is a histogram of tree heights. So we can see what this looks like, but just like we did earlier with the tick marks to be like showing some code, this is actual code in R. So it says R to say it's R code, and then actual code, the N row of trees. If we put that in a code chunk and run that, it's 31. So we should have the number 31 here in the knitted document. The mean trees for the variable height should be 76. So that's what it should be here. And then we're saying, okay, look, create a histogram within this code chunk, hist trees of height. Do the histogram of height for the trees data in this code chunk. And we'll see what this looks like, what was actually outputted. So our inline code, our data contains 31 trees with an average height of 76. That's exactly what we put in there with the code specifically. We didn't have to calculate it out already. We could just put it in with code. This would be great if you had multiple data sets or your data were changing and you didn't want to have to recalculate that and write it in a report. And then you have your output for the histogram of trees right below with no code showing because we put echo equals false. So no code will show with that, but it'll show the output, which was that histogram trees there. We added this code now. All right. And then finally, when you want your document to be complete and you want to share it with someone, sharing it as an HTML, a PDF, or etc. is great. And that's the knitting. So when you're done with your entire R Markdown document, click the knit button here. And there's a few qualifiers to it. You could say knit to HTML, knit to PDF, knit to Word, knit with parameters, whatever you wanted to do. It's also Control-Shift-K for PC, so I assume it's Command-Shift-K for Macs. If you have any errors in your code, it will not run the entire way, and it will give you an error in the console. It'll be like error on line, whatever, and then you can go to line and figure out what's going on. These errors are very frustrating to deal with because sometimes you're just like, it works normally, why is it not working now? So they can be tricky and confusing, but just as you're working through your code, make sure you're error-free. And note that you also must specify within the early code chunk any packages you use with the library package name. So I know a lot of times we're just like adding packages, and we can add packages through our library in here, the library packages tab. So you could click on them and attach that package or whatever. But you have to put it in the R Markdown document for it to knit. It must be in a code chunk because R Markdown is taking everything in its document and saying this has to run. And if there are no libraries in this document, it will not run. Any code that is associated with libraries that were attached but not specified in this document. So just like you load a package using the library package name function, must put it in a code chunk. And I would put all of your packages you use in the first code chunk so you don't have any errors throughout. So for conclusion today, you can now create basic and more advanced R Markdown documents with a little bit of creativity and practice. So see, these are a lot of the basics of wordsmithing, aesthetics of this, knitting, hiding code chunks, adding code chunks. And there's a lot more you can do with this R Markdown document. This is just some of the basics. I recommend this book, Hadley Wickham and Garrett Rollman's book, The R for Data Science. Their second edition is for free online. If you click on this link in the HTML file, R for Data Science, right here, second edition, freely available online. And they have some translations as well for Spanish, Italian, Turkish, and Portuguese. So I would check out that. But this is the end of the R Markdown tutorial, and there's a lot more you can do with it.